So throughout the life of my channel, you guys have seen me build like 4 or 5 different CRXs, my FD RX-7, my first gen RX-7, and just recently my 300ZX C32. So you can probably tell by this point in time that my thing is coupes and in most cases hatchbacks, which has probably led a few of you to wonder what's going on with these 2 4-door sedans sitting in my backyard, basically untouched. Well, luckily today is going to be the day that I can finally explain exactly why I have these. So this one, so they're both obviously the same car. They're both MX-73 Toyota Cressidas. A little bit of a niche car from back in the early 80s. Most people don't even know what these are by now, I think. I didn't know what they were until I met my buddy who owned one that I'm now working on. And these are both mine. This one is completely bone stock, and except for the current wheels that are on it, but they're just there for having the other car on not good wheels while I paint it and potentially mess up the wheels. Obviously full interior and just, yeah, I mean, nothing really much to say about this. Bone stock, complete, normal car. Does run and drive, just overheats a little bit while under a lot of load in the highway, so I gotta change the head gasket on it. Otherwise, perfectly good car. But nothing really special about it. This one, on the other hand, is just a little bit more special. All right, so why do I have a 2JZ swapped Toyota Cressida, right? When obviously there's a lot of better chassis I could put that engine into, right? So basically, I wanted to buy something to do a drift car build with, because I love drifting and I haven't had a chance to really do it in like 3 years now. And I would drift my RX-7, but that car would probably cost me like a minimum of $15,000 to fix and like 3 or 4 months of work if I were to crash it into a wall while taking it out of drift track, which is where these come in. So for one thing, the engine in this car I got back when I was in Japan and, you know, working off the boat out there. I had my RX-7. We were only allowed to really technically have one car, but one of my bosses at the time was trying to sell his Toyota Aristo, which had this engine into it. He said it had a little bit of like a misfire he wasn't sure about and had some issue with the dash. Told me to give it to me for $1,000 running and driving. So obviously I couldn't skip out on that. I bought the car, pulled the engine out of it, even after I even got to drive it around for a little while. It took like a couple months before we went underway. But I pulled the engine out of it, got it shipped back here in my household goods. So I'm $1,000 into this engine. And then when I got here, I was originally thinking about swapping it into a first gen RX-7 and making that a drift car. After learning a lot about those, I realized it probably wasn't the best idea for a drift car, and also I just kind of like the 12A in those. They're kind of cool. But then this showed up on Marketplace. It was like $700 I think listed. I think I talked them down to like $500 because of a few issues with it that I didn't think were going to be easy to fix, like missing body panels. But he told me that he had a second one that he would sell me the trunk off of and some other pieces I needed for this one. So I said, okay, well, just, you know, let me know when you get it out of here, because he literally had these things sitting in his backyard with a bunch of other random Toyotas. Like, he used to be like a Toyota tech back in the day, and he had a bunch of them that he was just sitting in his backyard doing nothing with. Finally decided to sell them all after they had started to rust into the ground. So took that one home, and then a few weeks later he messaged me about that one. Said, hey, originally the guy was going to buy like the whole front end off of this one and a bunch of other parts, so I was just going to sell you the trunk, but he backed out. Do you want the whole car for $200? Obviously I said yes, brought it home, and then got this one running and driving, kind of just cleaned up. You know, obviously that one became the drift car and that one didn't, for good reason. The interior on this one was absolutely destroyed when I got it. You realize there's nothing left of the interior, and that is because there was not a single piece of this car worth saving except for the top half of the dash, which I only saved for the sake of having a dash in general, right? Otherwise it was just gonna be a cluster sitting right there if anything. But literally the, you know, the whole like structure of the frame underneath the dash, everything was just rusted completely out. Every single piece of metal that wasn't coated on the interior looked something along the lines of this. when I pulled it out. But surprisingly, most of the rest of the car, like the metal, the sheet metal of the chassis, is in pretty decent condition. There's a few holes in the roof, things like that, that I've patched up with some stickers. But I mean, the handbrake, literally, I think I have it in here somewhere. Never mind, it's in my garage, but let me pop the trunk. This is the condition the brake pedal was in when I pulled it out. So obviously I'm looking for a replacement for that. But yeah, so this one became the obvious candidate for the drift car because it's just pretty much beyond saving, like without buying another whole chassis to swap a bunch of stuff out with anyway. Which is why this one hasn't really been touched, because I got to change the head gasket on it, like I said. But after that, I'm just going to sell it, because the biggest reason that I decided to use this chassis as a drift car is because, despite owning 2 of them, I don't really care about these cars. I'm sorry, if you love these cars, that's your thing, cool. I think they're neat. I don't really care about them other than that, but I think, based on my experience drifting my friend's Chaser, and I think at least one other, you know, 4-door sedan car in Japan, I kind of like the way these things drift. And so I'm going to build one into a halfway decent drift car, and then I can actually finally drift this car in a way that I'll actually be getting my skills, you know, increased significantly, instead of constantly having to go, you know, 50% because I don't want to crash my car into a wall. So with all that out of the way, I'm gonna get this thing moved. I have a full-size trailer that I recently purchased so that I can use to get this car to and from the track every time without having to worry about it. And since you guys last see me, you may have already noticed there's a little bit more concrete over here. I finally pulled the trigger on something I've been wanting to do for years and just haven't had the, you know, time or money or whatever to do it. But I finally got my driveway completely repaved. No more uneven cracked concrete and the big puddle that would always be right there and all that stuff. I got room to park pretty much all of my cars in the driveway. That's where this car is going to go sit, and we're going to start ripping it apart. And I got quite a few different things to do to this car to get it ready for drifting. But hopefully, at the end of the day, there's one more drift event that I know of before the end of the year that I might be able to make it to. That's at the end of October out in Rockingham Speedway. I'm going to try to get this car done in time for that so that I can take it out drifting for the first time. More than likely, again, like probably the last event of the year. If there's any others, I'll try to make it, but you know, working on a pretty tight schedule here, and I got to build an entire car in less than 2 months. So without any further chit-chatting from me, let's go ahead and pull it into the driveway and get started. All right, now that it's in the driveway, let's get that interior cleaned out. Well, in case you're wondering what over $10,000 worth of parts looks like, here you go. Is it more or less than you would have expected? Go ahead, take a good look. Get an idea of all the random stuff we'll be doing to this car to get it ready to go to the drift track and actually perform halfway decently, hopefully. Alright, but anyway, I think it's a good time now to go ahead and get started on this with the most basic step possible. Just give it a wash, because I haven't washed this thing in about, probably gotta be about 2 years now. It's just been sitting in my backyard to the point that it has literally got moss and stuff just growing all over the back of it. So let me get that all out of the way and in a safe place, and then I'm gonna go ahead and pressure wash this thing off and get it ready to start building. All right, well, the day kind of got away from me, but I can confidently say that this car is officially as clean as it has ever been, cleaner than it has ever been since the day I bought it, and probably since the day the previous owner bought it. And it still doesn't look all that great, but we're just gonna use it the way it is. I'm not going to put a bunch of time and effort into buffing and polishing this paint. It could look pretty good if I did that, but there would still be peeling, clear coat, and just all kinds of, we'll call it patina, throughout the car. So I'm mostly just trying to get the chassis as clean as I can so there's not so much dirt and debris falling in my face while I'm trying to work on this thing. The only part that I haven't done so far is the engine bay, because I didn't want to spray a bunch of water in the engine bay with an engine inside of it. So with that being said, before I end this video, the last thing I want to do is to pull this engine out of here and get it on the stand so we can start tearing into that and getting ready to not rebuild, but basically just do a bunch of resealing on the engine and a few reliability mods for the most part. But the sun is getting very low and I'm running out of daylight very quickly. Also, I gotta wake up pretty early tomorrow for work, so I'm gonna call it a day here, and tomorrow we'll get to that. And with the engine out of the way, you can clearly see exactly how dirty and unfortunately rusty this engine bay is. So let's go ahead and get some degreaser in here and a pressure washer back out. Clean this all out, and then we'll do something about this area, but honestly I'm not super concerned. It's in front of the axle, so this is all just, you know, crumple zone. Not really something I'm too concerned about. Looking perfect. I'll probably hit it with some kind of primer, a little bit of some kind of top coat, get it nice and more or less protected after I grind it down a bit, but I'm not going to worry too much about all that rust. I'm probably going to have to find a new one of these though, because the mounting points out for the sway bar are so rusted that I'm pretty sure those bolts are just going to snap off inside the nuts, whatever's left of the nuts. And after a little pressure washing, this actually cleaned up pretty nicely. This all more or less resembles what it would have looked like from the factory, you know, at least on the upper visible areas of it, not down here. But I'm pretty happy with it. I know I'm kind of more or less known for being the guy that paints every car he works on before he does any crazy work to it, but this car is completely different from all those. I'm not going to paint this car at all, so I'm actually just going to leave this just the way it is. I just wanted to clean it up, really just for my own personal comfort, I guess, for whenever I have to do some work to this engine at the track right here or whatever, you know. So pretty much where I wanted to be at by the end of this video. So coming up, going to be doing a lot of work to the engine, doing a lot of work to the chassis, there's a whole lot that's going to go into this car, despite the fact of how simple of a build it is. But anyway, this video is supposed to be mostly more or less just an introduction to this build. I wasn't really planning on getting into any crazy work, like, you know, starting the engine build or doing any work to the chassis in this one. Just kind of wanted to get in the driveway, get it all kind of taken apart, stripped down, ready to work on, and sort of explained in general, right? So I'm going to be doing this this build series a little bit differently than I have most of the time. I usually try to do like a whole bunch of like work all at one time, kind of get like a huge major portion of it knocked out, and then just put a video out for that. For the sake of actually getting, you know, videos out on a, you know, decent schedule, you know, just so my channel doesn't kind of get like ignored by YouTube every time I upload, because that's kind of been the story over the past 3 or so years. I'm going to be doing more like specific videos on this build. So, you know, like one build will be more or less just the engine, and then it'll be like, you know, the transmission, the drivetrain, the chassis, suspension, things like that, right? So expect more uploads, but expect shorter uploads, which I think for some of you would be good, because I do have some pretty long videos. So I'm going to try to change things up a little bit, make it a little bit easier to watch, and yeah, help me out too, because I'll have more videos coming out than usual. But if you enjoyed this and you're excited for this build, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe so you can see more, and I'll see you guys next time.